Hi everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of a brand new podcast from Teletrac Navman, Mobilizing the Future of Fleets. It's a podcast dedicated to helping fleet and transportation businesses navigate the roads ahead. I'm Barney Goffer, Product Manager for Fleet Energy Solutions at Teletrac Navman, and joining me today is a leading global authority on the subject of EV, Special Advisor to the UK Government and founder of Zero Carbon Futures, Professor Colin Herron. Professor Herron notably spent 17 years at Nissan, where he was instrumental in the rollout of the Leaf, the world's first mass-market electric vehicle. Also joining us is Nate Valaik, Director of Strategy, Alternative Energy and Sustainability Fleets at Teletrac Navman's parent company, Vontier. Nate Valaik is a well-rounded business leader with diverse experience in strategy, business development and alternative energy applications. And today we're going to be talking around the impact that behavioural change has on the success of a mixed energy future. So my question to you chaps is do we need to stop thinking about alternative energy in the same way as traditional fuel?
A lot of the population want to swap like for like.
Yep.
So they want to have a massive impact on the environment without doing anything different. So if I can give them an electric car that once a week they plug into something and in 5 minutes it's full and they can drive 300 miles, they'll have it. Right? At the moment, it's not like that. And people are currently having to change their behaviors so that they can transition to this vehicle. As I've said, I don't have a home charger. I have to check what the mileage is and I have to plan a point when I charge. I don't have to do that with petrol. I can just go to a station and I can fill it. There will come a point, possibly with solid state batteries or in big trucks with hydrogen or whatever, where the person will not notice the difference. We're not there yet.
Yeah, far from it, based on what we hear people say out there. Nate, what's the experience over there in the US in terms of people's, sentiment towards transitioning to alternative energy solutions?
Well, like Colin said, right, there are, behavioral changes required, right? The experience is not the same, obviously, as owning an ICE-powered vehicle. I would say if you play it out and you look at the long run, however, right, if you play out the infrastructure development and the reliability piece of it, there are some, very tangible benefits, right? From a cost perspective, I mean, it's pretty undebatable from a cost perspective. It will be cheaper in the long run. So that's extremely positive for price conscious fleets and for passengers as well. It's quieter, right? The driving experience is different. It's maybe more enjoyable, more peaceful. And when you think about the charging experience, right, plug and charge as a protocol, essentially allows you to plug in the vehicle and all of the payment and the authentication, it happens, right? And your vehicle starts charging, right? So there are, I think, if you look kind of mid and long term, there are ways that this plays out where it becomes a much more seamless experience, more enjoyable experience, right? And like Colin said, we're working through challenges at the moment, but they're certainly not insurmountable. And I think looking long term, there's some real tangible benefits.
Sure. So the charging experience is key to all of this, in my opinion, because you hear so many negative stories out there. If the charger doesn't work, it was the same price as it cost me to fill my internal combustion engine. How much of that is true, and how do we solve that? How do we get over this negativity around that experience of charging?
Take the second point first,
Yeah.
This is what I say to people. Okay, why have we got EVs? So that we can save the human race and make the environment a lot better. Whoever said it was going to be cheaper? Mm-hmm. Whoever said per mile it was going to be cheaper than a diesel? So why is it the cost of per mile a comparative? Why is their assumption it will be cheaper? If it's the same price, is that a problem?
Well, I guess not. Yeah. Go for it, Nate.
Jumping in on the experience side, Barney, I mean, I think a lot of the problems cited are real, right? A lot of the times, especially in North America, you show up to a charger and it's not working, or you need to authenticate multiple times and plug and unplug the vehicle to get things to work, right? So again, like it's not to say as if the challenges aren't there. I think they are. But if you compare it right to again, to the ice world, that infrastructure has been deployed, running for 100 years, right? There's been a lot of time to work through any challenges there, and it's a finely tuned machine, right? Uh, I think it would be just unwise to think that this transition isn't going to have some challenges inherent, right? And the good news is we're still very early, but we've made pretty significant progress.
People go on social media when they have a problem. The other million people in this country don't go on social media to say, I haven't got a problem.
And I've had a great experience.
And I've had a great experience. There's only a few people do that, So it is changing, but the people who have the bad experience are very vocal. Those who have a good experience don't tend to say so.
Yeah. So what needs to happen then? How do we change that dynamic, if you like, in terms of the positive stories, the fact that I can go and charge my vehicle quite readily. I don't need to fill it all the way up and charge it all the way up. I just need to charge for the distance that I need to go to get home, so I can use my home charger. What needs to happen to change that narrative then?
I was talking to a motoring correspondent last night, and he said it's getting concerning now, and there's a survey I've read recently, that 62% of people who don't have EVs now believe the negative media. Yeah. They believe it's correct. So there are people on social media lobbying, doing whatever we can to address the social media, which is literally posting lies. We've got TV channels who are doing it. They are, for some reason, there is a big negativity. Those are the stories which keep getting repeated over and over again. Car parks will collapse. This is happening. This is happening. It's not true, right? My car is 20% heavier, not twice the weight. But that's a mantra that's out there. Until the big change that happened in Norway was it got to the point where in a coffee shop, 3 people were talking, at least one had an EV. When it got to 2 had an EV, the 3rd person accepted it. And it was only by the people in the coffee shops or the bars say, well, I've got one, that's not a problem. Really? But until you get to that level where people are saying, well, come and try mine, or talk to my wife, or do this, then you can get over that point. But at the moment, with 1 million out of 35 million, you're starting to see them, people are seeing them, the sales are going up, so people are ignoring it, but it's a very powerful anti-EV lobby.
Of course, there comes a point at which, if you want to buy a new car, in a few years, it will be an EV.
It will be an EV.
So that I guess over time things just naturally change, right?
Yes.
Okay, Nate. I sense that certainly in the UK this feels like it's been quite divisive, almost politically divisive in many respects as well. But is that the same over in the US, Nate, or is it still is it so nascent that it's not necessarily the case?
No, I think that political divisiveness is probably here too, right? In a similar way, right? Where we read the same news articles, et cetera. I would say an answer, right? How do you overcome that, right? I do think, the onus is certainly on both the public and the private sector to kind of prime the pump in a way, especially on the infrastructure side. And the way I would characterize that is for drivers, right? It's about accessibility, reliability, and then a frictionless experience, right? On the accessibility piece, right? If I'm going to go make a road trip, are there actually enough chargers, right, to make that road trip, right? That's just a baseline question, right? And I think over here, obviously, the NEVI, funds are meant to address that basic question of, hey, can I actually just go charge when I need to, where I need to, right? Baseline accessibility. Nobody thinks about that from an ICE perspective because there's however many thousands of forecourts, right, to cater to that need. On the reliability, it's if I show up, will the charger work? When I navigate to that charger, do I know if it's working or not, right? And that's, again, just baseline competency of infrastructure, right? It's still challenges to work out, but I think that is a hurdle we need to overcome, both on the, and again, the public and the private sector both have a part to play. And then, the final piece, which I think could really push the puzzle if you get those first 2 in places on the frictionless experience, which is, hey, can I make it easy for someone to pull in, plug in, and charge seamlessly, right? And so you're seeing over in Europe, at least the kind of the democratization of payment platforms. You need to provide kind of open means of payment versus signing up and having an app or an account. The US is playing out similarly. Of course, you hopefully have the adoption of plug and charge coming fairly soon on kind of a more mass market scale. But I think those are the three factors where if we can kind of get those right, a lot of the bad news starts to go away.
I don't know in the States, but there was a fundamental mistake here which happened. So in an area, if they won money to put 12 high power chargers in, they would put them in 12 locations. I would say, no, put 3 and 4 locations. So if I turn up, the chances of all 3 occupied, possible. The chances of all 3 broken, not likely. So a lot of the negativity came when somebody drove to a single, somebody's on it, you drive to the single, it's broken. That's annoying. So now we're seeing a situation, as I saw on the motorway here, it was actually 14 in that service station with 2 cars on. Yeah. So there was 12 vacant. If we'd started to do that initially, then these people who kept getting this bad experience would have been reduced.
Indeed. This comes back to the poor deployment strategy, right? And the lack of thought in terms of actually being a bit more strategic about it ultimately.
Yes.
Yeah. So Nate, you kind of touched on something a moment ago I'd like to explore a little bit more. Can you talk to us about the technology that's actually available today to help create that seamless experience? Where is it now and kind of where's it going to be in the next year or 2 years?
Sure, absolutely. Again, from an accessibility perspective, I think there's 2 factors there. One is the infrastructure physically in the ground, right? Are there enough chargers to meet the need? But I think what also falls into that accessibility bucket is this notion of roaming, right? So most EV drivers have an account with different providers who essentially allow them to have an account and access infrastructure and pay for charging. Ideally, what roaming facilitates is I can use one app or maybe 2 and access a lot of infrastructure. Again, getting to this accessibility notion of I need to be able to know I can find a charge wherever I am, so I'm comfortable, right? So that's the piece on roaming. And there's, again, that's been deployed over in Europe for years. Over in North America, you see a lot of kind of peer-to-peer roaming agreements between the different large charge point operators. And that's something that, from our perspective at Vontier, our technology certainly facilitates and we're intimately involved in enabling that for different charge point operators or mobility service providers. The other factor, right, and this kind of gets into the reliability piece is there's so many stakeholders involved in achieving reliability for charging infrastructure, right? If you look at why a charger goes down, there's so many reasons, right? It could be the payment terminal is not communicating. It could be a problem with the payment terminal and the payment provider. It might be simple communications issues between the charger and the network itself. It could be, again, it could be the physical infrastructure, right? And so I think that's maybe a little more complex because there's so many stakeholders involved in that equation. Our technology at Vontier sits on top of the infrastructure from a software perspective, and we have algorithms to understand what's going on at the charger and then do some self-healing, right? Some stop-start, some other activities, et cetera, to hopefully, negate the need to have someone come out to the charger, look at it and fix it, right? So again, there's ways to deliver value there. And then, of course, there is just the, do you have a physical service footprint to go out and repair infrastructure if it needs repairing, right? That's important. And I think that service infrastructure is still getting built out as well. And then lastly, on the kind of the frictionless experience, right? That's really where this whole notion of plug and charge and ISO 15118 comes in, right? That's this protocol where, you simplify that experience for the driver. They simply plug in. All of the authentication and payment happens in the background and you start charging your vehicle. I mean, what could be more convenient than that experience? And I think, again, it's early days, but you're seeing there's a big ecosystem of players who needs to be involved to make it happen. It's the auto OEMs, it's the charger manufacturers, it's the backend software providers, the charge point operators, et cetera. but you're seeing announcements there, you're seeing pilots there, and I think as that starts to get adopted more widely, you start to solve these challenges.
Nate, one more question for you, just in relation to what you're talking about there in terms of the user experience. Is it different for the consumer, so me going to the shops at the weekend, for example, or on holiday, compared to a fleet manager? Or